Why are the new cameras today so expensive, even though mirrorless cameras are supposed to be cheaper to build because they have lesser moving parts? Hi and welcome back to the channel. I'm Steven from X-E5 Photos. For today, I want to discuss about 3 different cameras from different brands. You can already see it in my title or description of this video. And all 3 have a similar problem, and that would be their prices, which I think we can all agree that they are pretty expensive, if not overpriced itself. So starting off with the new camera that was just announced minutes ago at the time of recording this video, and that is the Fujifilm X-E5. Now this is the camera that all of you who were complaining about XM5 having no IBIS and no EVF would be very happy about, because finally you got what you asked for, IBIS and EVF. So this camera has a small EVF at the top left corner, 2.36 million dots EVF, and it is a pretty small one, 0.62 times magnification. I wanted to complain about that, but I guess that I can forgive Fujifilm for this one, because this is a pretty small camera. They don't have much space, so yeah, small EVF, fine. And then it finally has 5-axis IBIS with a 40 MP sensor, the same one from the X-T5 and what was the flagship again? XH2, yep. I'm referring to the 40 megapixel version, not the stacked sensor version. So the specs, they all look good on paper. 6.2K video and so on, they all look pretty good. Just that the price, $1699. I can buy a Nikon Z5 Mark II now, and it has everything I mentioned, EVF, IBIS and so on, and I get a full frame sensor. Sure, 24 megapixels, not 40, but I'll take full frame any day at this price. That's the problem over here. So I know that those of you who prefer smaller and lighter cameras would disagree with me. And truth to be told, this is the most attractive Fujifilm camera to me in years. I would like to have a small rangefinder style camera that has IBIS and EVF, and most importantly, it needs to have interchangeable lenses. Given that I have no interest in medium format at all, I think this is the closest thing to what I'm looking for, right? Not the X106, which is fixed lens. And this camera, together with the 23mm f2.8, the new pancake lens, additional $200. The lens, I'm fine with that. $200 is acceptable for a pancake 23mm 2.8. But the body, $1699, I'm not sure what to think about that. It feels way too expensive for an APS-C camera. But this is not yet the worst offender. The worst part is what is about to come after this. When this camera does pre-order sell out, and then the aftermarket price would go up to $2,000 plus $3,000 maybe. Yeah, it will happen. So if you want this camera and you can afford one, pre-order it as soon as possible. Yeah. And if I had, like spare $2,000 or $3,000 lying around, I would pre-order one right now. And then after I use it, I'll decide whether to keep it or to sell it. Should I choose to sell it, I'm unlikely to lose much money, if any at all, given this is Fujifilm we're talking about. So I'm liking what I'm seeing, but I'm waiting to see what the big reviewers on YouTube and everywhere else has to say about this camera. The next camera, which I find to be pretty overpriced as well, is the Sony FX2, which was announced quite a while ago, weeks ago. $2,700 US. Now it really depends on what perspective you're looking at this camera from. If you look at this solely from Sony's lineup alone, we don't compare with any other brands, this is the cheapest FX full-frame cinema camera at $2,700 US. The only problem is that I can compare this to the A7C2 or the A7 IV even, and those two cameras are way cheaper, despite having the same sensor and the same internals. You can buy a brand new A7 IV in Malaysia for around 7,000 plus Malaysian ringgit today, which is around $1,600, $1,700 US, and the A7C2 is barely more expensive, like $50 US more. Also, the 7,500 plus Malaysian ringgit territory, right? So this FX2, in comparison to the A7C2, it cost an additional 1,000 US dollars or so, which makes no sense because, yeah, the same internals in a new body. Sure, I'm getting a cooling fan, but I don't remember seeing complaints of overheating in the A7C2 or the A7 IV even, because the video spec on those cameras are not very demanding. 4K 30 full frame or 4K 60 cropped APS-C. So those are not exactly very demanding specs for a mirrorless camera by today's standards. I wouldn't expect those two cameras to overheat. So if the A7 IV and the A7C2, they do not overheat, why would I need to add a fan to the same internals and price it another $1,000? Like, why would I buy this thing? I have no idea. And this camera is so weird in the sense that it is supposed to be a video first camera, a cinema camera, yet what we got over here is a very slow readout sensor with a lot of rolling shutter, which is unsuitable for panning video at least. Yet, this camera is also unsuitable for photography when it is missing a proper mechanical shutter. All you get is a front curtain shutter, even though that tilting EVF is going to be very attractive to street photographers at least. Like, how do I even describe this camera? It is not good enough for video, not good enough for photo at the same time. And it is no surprise that this camera is reported as having very low pre-order numbers, at least that was what Sony Alpha rumors mentioned. And it feels like the reason why Sony made this FX2 is because they want to get rid of additional 33 megapixel sensors that are being used in the A7 IV and A7C2. Maybe the A7 V was supposed to be a minimal upgrade, an incremental upgrade over the A7 IV. They were planning to use the same sensor, that was my guess. But having seen what Nikon did with the Z6 Mark III, what Canon did with the R6 II, fast readout sensor, and potentially an even faster sensor in the future R6 Mark III, and now Panasonic has the S1 II with a partially stacked sensor, the same one in Z6 III. Maybe Sony saw all these things and then they decided to go back to the drawing board. And they have to do something about the A7 V. They can't use this slow sensor anymore. And this excess stock has to go into some new camera model. So that is my guess over here. It is just a conjecture of mine. But A7 V better be good. Yeah, it better have a partially or a fully stacked sensor. Otherwise, things are looking rough for Sony at the moment. The next camera that I want to discuss about is the Lumix S1 II, which also came out very recently. Now, this camera is basically an improved Nikon Z6 Mark III. It is like a Z6 Mark 3.5 in a way. Same partially stacked sensor, but Panasonic tuned the sensor in a way where the readout speed is slightly slower than the Nikon Z6 III. The Z6 III, I think the sensor readout speed in video is like 9.6 milliseconds if I remembered correctly. The S1 II is slightly slower at 12 milliseconds, which is still very fast. But in exchange, you get more dynamic range, especially in their DR boost mode, right? Which lowers the readout speed even further, but you get more DR. So you get to choose between more or less DR and more or less readout speed. You get to choose, which is the way that should be done by Nikon, I believe. So it is like Lumix took the same sensor, but then they squeezed more out of it. So now we know that the partially stacked sensor having less DR is not necessarily having less DR in a technical sense, but it is all about how the engineers tune the sensor. Yeah. So with that in mind, the problem with this camera is once again the price. $3,200 US. Like, I don't see myself ever paying more than $3,000 for a 24 megapixel sensor. No matter how fast the readout speed is, even if it had a global shutter, I'm not paying over $3,000 for 24 megapixels. That's the thing. So if it is using the same sensor as the Z6 Mark III, which is supposed to be cheaper than a fully stacked sensor because Nikon said so, a compromise between speed and price, then why is the Lumix S1 II so much more expensive than the Z6 Mark III, I mean? The Z6 Mark III currently can be had for around $2,300 US, so the S1 II is a whole $1,000 more expensive. My best guess Lumix sells in smaller quantities, in smaller numbers, their cameras than Nikon or any other brand. So when you place a smaller order on a very specific part like a camera sensor, then you have to pay more for it. And as a result, the entire camera becomes more expensive. That is my guess over here. Once again, I'm just guessing. But $3,200 I mean, you look at Malaysian pricing in my country, right? In my country of Malaysia, barely anyone uses Lumix. I've seen maybe 2 or 3 people in conventions, in events using Lumix, but that is it. Nobody buys it. And for very obvious reasons over here, this is a pre-order announcement from a local camera shop which I really like, YL Camera. And you look at this Lumix S1ii pre-order price, camera body 15,600 Malaysian ringgit. Kit with a 24 to 105 f4 is 21,000 Malaysian ringgit. So if we look at the body only of 15,600 Malaysian ringgit, that is the equivalent of $3,700 in today's exchange rate. Sure, we have our taxes and stuff like that, but $3,700, what can you buy with this money? That's right, Nikon Z8. So I bought this Z8 more than a year ago for around 15,500 Malaysian ringgit. Exactly the same price as this S1ii over here, but the exchange rate last year was more like $3,400. But the point here is that this is exactly the same price as a Z8 brand new. Why would I buy this even if it had 32-bit audio or open gate video? Sure, open gate video is nice. 32-bit float audio is nice, but at this price, I'm not buying something 24 megapixels. It has to be 45 or higher. So, once again, why are cameras so dang expensive today? I just don't get it. Canon has the R8, which if you don't mind single card slot and no IBs, you can buy a brand new Canon R8. This thing right here. Can get one brand new for $1,100 today. Nikon is selling the Z5 Mark II for really cheap, Z8 as well, ZF as well. So it feels like, you know, Canon and Nikon are able to get their camera body prices down to very reasonable levels. But Fujifilm and Lumix especially are pricing the camera bodies so high. And I just couldn't figure out the reason why. And I have even more bad news over here, but this time around from Canon, and this is just a rumor at this point. Canon EOS R6 Mark III resolution increase. According to Canon rumors, it may go up to 30 or 32 megapixels or so, the R6 Mark III, fully stacked. And the price, the R6 Mark III will cost more than $24.99 launch price of the Canon R6 Mark II. So now, if we see the R6 Mark III, and also the future A75 going up to near $3,000, things are looking really bad. A mid-range 20 plus, 30 plus megapixel camera is going to cost you $3,000. And I'm not sure where are we going to go from this. Like, will price just keep going up? Because Panasonic has done it, the S1ii, their mid-range hybrid camera has broken the $3,000 mark. And I'm afraid Canon and Sony will follow suit because they look at a competitor doing fine, selling well at $3,000. Why not increase our own prices as well? I know this is probably partially related to the tariffs in the US, but everyone else outside of the US are going to get hit at this rate. Like, everyone are going to have to pay higher prices and things are looking pretty bad. Mirrorless cameras, you know, they don't have a mirror box inside. They have less moving parts. They are supposed to be cheaper to build, but instead, all we get over here are increasing prices for the camera bodies. So until then, I would love to hear your thoughts below. Please do comment if you have something to say about this. And until then, thanks for watching. If this video is enlightening, at least please do give it a like and subscribe to this channel for more camera and photography stuff. Until then, I'll see you soon. Thanks again and goodbye.